Hey everybody, Lawrence and I want to welcome our first sponsor to the show, Kensho International. I wear their gis, Lawrence wears their gis, and when it comes to Kabuto, we're talking about handcrafted bows, tonfa, and sai. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. In fact, the last pair of tonfa that I held at Kensho International were built out of 400-year-old oak from a barn in France. You want quality, you want high-end stuff, go see Mike at Kensho International. Give him a call, give him an email, tell him I sent you. Now on with the show. I'm Kris Wilder. This is Martial Secrets. You're
Lawrence Kane.
And it is still Martial Secrets, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
And I haven't changed my name yet today.
No, you haven't. And that's a good thing. And considering, well, wait a minute. You have several pieces of ID with different...
Yeah, but we're not supposed to talk about that.
All right. Today on Martial Secrets, we're going to talk about The Who's rock opera Tommy.
And choose the one thing.
And we're not talking about bacon, are we?
Or Highlander.
Okay. And we're going to talk about watching you, watching me.
And it happened at the stadium.
Great. So, Lawrence, I'm up in Canada. I'm at a judo tournament. I'm actually up at the Burnaby tournament. The Mukai.
I remember being there.
Yeah, the Mukai family. I mean, they've run that dojo forever, right? So I'm up there at the tournament, and there's a guy who gets led in to the gymnasium in his gi, and he's got this number on the back, like, you know, he's an international competitor. It's like, oh, what's going on, you know? And I realize this guy's blind.
Really?
Yeah. And so it's like, wow, blind judoka. That's kind of cool. And so then I started talking to somebody, and they said, well, he's deaf too. It's like, oh, wait a minute, he's blind and he's deaf. It's like, oh, wow. So I started asking more questions. Like, when did this guy have an accident or something? You know, how did this happen? I mean, was he doing judo and then he was in a car wreck or something? And they're like, no, he was born deaf and blind.
Really? He was born deaf and blind, and he's competing internationally.
And he's competing internationally.
Wow.
The number on his back was from the Special Olympics, like it had been in Barcelona or something at that time. Now this is a long time ago, and I think it was Barcelona or somewhere in Spain, but he'd competed and against other people that, you know, had some disability, you know, whether they were blind or deaf or whatever. But it was really fascinating to watch this guy fight because you know, you'd run up and they'd tap him on the back like, okay, you're done, you know, you're going to, and that tap means, you know, tap, 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 tap. It means stop what you're doing, right? Internationally, right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
But that meant for him to stop what he was doing, and then the ref would like take his elbow and he would stand up. And then they would position him on his mark, and then they would walk towards each other, and they would actually start in the grip so that, you know, he didn't have to find his grip. They would start in the grip. And
yeah, but you know, even so, that's, I mean, you know, when I learned judo, they didn't have contacts yet, right? You know, I had took my glasses off so they wouldn't get broken, couldn't see very well. That was tough. I can imagine doing that blind. Even if you're starting in the grip, that's got to be a real challenge.
Well, I mean, to some degree, I know that when I'm doing groundwork, I oftentimes have my eyes closed.
Well, for groundwork, yeah, I was thinking about the standing game. I mean, you know, you by the time you get to groundwork, you might have already lost, depending on how you got to the ground, right? So.
Well, there you go. And so come to find out, you know, so I was watching this guy ref the match, and then I went over and I said, how do you communicate to this guy? How does he know if he has a wazari or a koka or whatever? And he said, well, on one side of his hand is his score, and on the other side of his hand, on his palm, on the palm is his score, and on the back of the hand is his opponent's score. So I'll give him like one finger and then a half of a finger, and he knows that that's, you know, whatever, however it was codified.
Yeah, wow.
But it was just it was a hand symbol, yeah. And I don't remember how he did, but I do remember the part that I thought that was, at least this is the image that stuck with me, was at the end of his matches, he was sitting on a balance beam, you know, kind of serving as his seat. And he was sitting on this balance beam, and he was eating an orange, but he was completely faced away from the action. wasn't watching the action because he can't.
Well, exactly.
You know, and he can't hear it, and I mean, he's just, you know, was in his own world.
Well, that must have been really tough though to learn. I mean, if you can't see and you can't hear instructions, it must have been really tough to get to where he was so he's able to compete. and to be able to go out in an open tournament, not Special Olympics, this is
Yeah,
just
this was an
competing against
open
regular,
tournament. Yeah.
open tournament
Yeah.
against just Joe average everybody who does judo, and to be able to compete and do even halfway well is a hell of an accomplishment, really.
Yeah. Well, that and also the Canadians have it right. I mean, they support their judo clubs because it's an Olympic sport. It gets a little national federal money stipend for
Right.
each student that they have in the dojo. I think that's the way that it works. I
Yeah,
think
well, I
it's a
know the
per
level
head.
of competition up there tended to be universally outstanding every time I went up there.
Yeah, I I walked away with 2 trophies that day. I will admit, I'll tell you that story. But the thing of it is that was actually the biggest lesson of the day was seeing that guy do his thing. It was amazing.
It really shows that you're really the limits that you think you have aren't really there.
Lawrence, it's training tip time. It's called Choose Something and Pursue It. Tell me what you're talking about.
Well, it's right? What is it that you want to work on? It could be for the day, it could be for the week, it could be for the month. What's the one thing that you really want to take away from your training? Let's say it's a stance, something simple. I want to get this
Like
stance
stances
better.
are simple. Come on.
Well, okay. You're coming from the perspective of somebody who's been doing this long enough to realize that they aren't. But, when you're first starting out, they seem simple, right? But to actually do them correctly, statically and moving, and understand, is this stance designed to be static? Is it designed to be the end of something? Whatever. It takes a lot of work. So if your it is, say, Sanjin Dachi, right? Why not tell people, hey, I want to work on Sanshin Dachi this month. Say, hey, I've seen you doing it in your kata. Tell me about it. Show me something, right? Just because the instructor doesn't have to be working on that today doesn't mean that you can't. And it could be before class, after class, during, if there's free time, outside, walking down an airplane aisle, whatever,
Yeah.
right?
And I would say this, don't restrict yourself to those that you think are the best at what you do. Now, I would travel around and I can remember I was kind of into doing some arnis for a little while, and I don't know, maybe a year or two. And I was always going, explain this to me, explain this to me. But what I was really trying to do was I was trying to get a better understanding of what my karate was about through that. It's like, why are you standing this way? Oh, it opens up the hip this way. And I was able to take those little lessons. Some of them were what I would call a negative lesson, which was, that's precisely why I don't want to do this way.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad thing within their structure. It just means that it was incongruent with what I was doing.
Right. It's incompatible, or it just doesn't.
But the lesson's still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but it's the why. It's the why and how, right? I mean, people will do similar things differently depending on the style. For example, power generation. Do you run your hips side to side or kind of up and down, to really, really simplify that? They're not really compatible, but the structure of everything aligning around that is. So I see what you mean.
Well, when you were doing your creative anachronism or whatever that thing was called, where you ran around in armor and talked in
And hit people
yees
with
and
sticks, yeah.
yeah, you talked in yees and thous and what magic is this you bring? We call it a cell phone. Hey, witch.
Yeah.
But excuse me, didn't you have guys that were that were really good or really had a good way? I mean, didn't you come up and go, hey, where'd you get that made?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was one of the interesting things. It's kind of a strange thing to be doing, but unlike most of the martial arts that came from Asia, where you can go buy your outfit, buy your weapon if you're doing, Aido or whatever it happens to be that you need one. A lot of that part, folks were making their own. So yeah, I learned leather working, I learned metal crafting, I learned, welding.
But you had to ask, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually you had to give something for it, right? So, it was some of that old feudal looking kind of thing, hey, you help me out in my shop, and for every 10 blades you grind, you get to keep one, that kind of thing. And so I actually learned some cool stuff and helped some people out in the process. And it's kind of similar in regular martial arts, right? Where, hey, show me how you did that, and then here, let me teach you something that I've been working on. And you still have that same kind of exchange thing. It's just you don't talk forsoothly in the process.
That's tickled me. Um, yeah, and I'll say this is that I mean, one year I set out to have the best shikodachi. I just decided I was going to have the best shikodachi in the organization. That's all there was going to be to it, and I was going to dedicate myself a year to it. And that was, and I did for a year. Now, it isn't like I woke up every morning and, and brushed my teeth, staring at myself going, Shikodachi, Shikodachi. I didn't do that. But I mean, I applied myself and I would see people from other schools and it was like, oh man, what are they doing? How are they putting their knees? What's the deal with their feet? And I would go over and I'd say, excuse me, can I ask you a question about your stance? What are you doing with your feet? Are you on this part of your foot? Are you on that part? And they'll explain it. They'll tell you.
Oh yeah, people love to talk about themselves, right? So if you ask questions, it usually
well, look
goes
at
well.
us, yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, no question about that.
But questions are almost always, if not appreciated and encouraged, at least tolerated. And you can learn a little of something from anybody at any rank at any time.
Well, I'll tell you this, that I mean I make no secret of it. It's I much prefer the student that's asking me questions than the one who just expects me to open up their skull and pour the information into that little puddle of mush that they call a brain.
Yeah, one little caveat on that is that, you teach sort of American style. There are folks who teach very, very traditionally who don't encourage, in fact, get pretty upset when you ask questions.
Yeah, it's perceived as being out of place.
Yeah, exactly. We've both had instructors like that in the past. So, make sure that you understand what the norm is at the dojo or the places that you practice and seminars you go to and whatnot. But back to the original point of whatever it is that you want to get better on, be it today, be it for a week, be it for a year. It sounds silly, Kris, working on a single stance for a year, but you know what? That's actually the way people did stuff back in the old days, and that's how they got really, really good, right?
You want to hear crazy talk? This is crazy stuff. When I was writing The Way of Sanshin Kata, I actually adjusted my desk so that when I was typing, I could stand in Shikodachi or Naihanshin Dachi while I typed. And I would do that. And I would venture that I probably did at least a quarter, maybe a third of that book standing in a sense. Sounds totally insane. And if anybody were to walk by, now, of course, I work in my home office, so I don't have coworkers walking by going, oh, Wilder's got hemorrhoids again. That isn't happening, or he's off his medication or something. I mean, I'm not recommending this because I don't think you should do it at work because you're going to have a visit with HR. But
yes, I would.
but I have the environment that allowed me to do that, and I did that, and I encourage people to get a little crazy and to get a little eccentric and pursue it.
But even so, I mean, I've sat in front of the television, just watching some show and realized, gee, this is a good opportunity to practice Shikodachi, whatever. And I might sit there for, 10, 20 minutes, whatever. And the only challenge with doing that is I tend to start focusing on the stance and the show goes away. So I have to bring my concentration back.
Well, and can we agree that Firefly never should have been canceled?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Best show there ever was.
That show absolutely rocked. And if you haven't, to your listeners out there, if you haven't seen it, go get it, watch it. You're going to watch it and you're going to go, this is just awesome. And it is.
It is. Serenity, good. Firefly, because they had more time, outstanding.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we've drifted a bit. So anyway, that brings to a close the training tip. Talking about what's going on at the dojo.
At the dojo.
Yeah. So what about watching students?
It's really interesting. We talked a little bit in the previous segment about, what's the one thing you're working on. You can tell when a student walks in, when they warm up before class or they talk to other folks, is this guy, is this gal, are they actually working on something or are they just showing up?
Oh, man. Sometimes I'll let the class go past its start time and just see what people are picking up and doing.
Yeah.
And if I've got people that are, they're working some bunkai-oyo or they're working a kata or something, I'll let that be. but I really take note of the people who are just standing there, bending their wrist back and forth like they're, preparing their exercise or something. I don't have a lot of time for that because it tells me that, to get back to that comment, they're just expecting me to open up their head and pour it in.
Right. Well,
Not a fan of that.
not really. There's different learning styles, and so you got to watch the expectations a touch. But with that caveat, I agree.
No, it's my way.
Yeah. Well, the folks that stand around doing nothing, if it's a brand new white belt,
Oh, that's
okay,
a
that's
different
fine.
thing.
But if you got a brown belt that's standing around waiting for you to tell him or her what to do, there's something wrong there.
There is, and I've run into it. In fact, I recently had a brown belt that was kind of doing that sort of thing, and asked them to leave because I wasn't going to put up with that anymore, and they did, and they were a little shocked too.
Yeah, and just to frame that a little bit for folks, it's there's only so much time in class, and to really make the most of it, your teaching style is really, I'm going to teach you karate during the class. It's not going to be a heavy workout session because you can do that on your own. I mean, we'll do a little stretching, whatever's needed, but so that no one gets hurt and
Well,
whatnot.
we get warmed
But
up.
yeah, it's a warm up, but it's not, I'm not going to spend an hour of
No,
calisthenics
this
and
is not
20
PT.
minutes
This
of,
is not
yeah.
physical training. It's not PT.
Exactly, right. And so, it's all about karate, and especially with the advanced classes, you have to have people who are there willing to learn karate.
Yeah, well,
And anxious to, right?
and excuse me, I would say this to any student that's out there: be aware that your instructor is watching and seeing how you're spending that time prior to when the class gets started, when it formally gets started, because that's a real indicator about what's going on. And in fact, I'll even go a little further. And if I kind of see a large part of the group moving one way, like maybe they're working a particular kata,
hmm
I'll throw away my lesson plan for the day, and that's what we'll do because
Yeah.
that's their direction.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, I watch not only the students, what they're doing, I also watch, like at seminars and whatnot, I see what students are doing in part as a reflection of their instructor. If you see a group of students who are serious, they're dedicated, they go, they're learning from somebody who's interesting. Maybe I got to get to know that person.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
And so, instructors are always watching, and it's what you do is representative of you as a student, and it's also representative of your instructor. So think about that.
I
right?
would go so far as to say that spending that time before and after class inefficiently is tantamount to only standing in the stance that you're supposed to be in when your instructor's looking, and then when they're not looking, to relax. It's that sort of thing to me. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the way
I'm not sure I'd go totally that far, but I certainly agree with the perspective. I mean, it's when you're in the dojo, you've set your workday aside, you've set your problems aside, you're there to focus on learning something. And I love students who practice outside the dojo as well. But at least once you've walked in the door, your mind really needs to be on your training.
Oh, yeah. And with that high note and a recommendation, not an admonition, but a recommendation, your focus needs to be on your training when you're at the dojo.
Free space.
What happened at the stadium? This story I absolutely love. And so you've got to tell this story because people, you're not gonna believe it.
Okay, so let me set this up a little bit. So this is after 9/11. So security is enhanced. In order to get into the stadium, you have to go, if you're carrying anything, you have to go through a bag inspection. You're walking through a gate, your ticket's getting taken, you're walking past at least one or two police officers and a whole bunch of stadium security folks. You travel to your seat, you sit down, you watch the game, etc. Right? So among other things, I'm responsible for the student section. And the first couple of games of the year tend to be pretty decent weather. So you see a lot of people wearing, t-shirts, shorts, whatever, relatively scantily clad at times, especially, if it's freshmen, sophomores, whatever, someone looking for hooking up with somebody that they haven't met yet, right? And sometimes...
So you're telling me Husky Stadium is like Studio 54. Is that what you're telling me?
Student section is.
Okay.
And,
All right. Very good.
I mean, there's people that go to the games just to go meet someone.
Oh,
You know,
okay. All right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's the same at Autzen Stadium
I
or
think
Martin
that
Stadium or anywhere else, but you know.
No. We go and we watch the game. When you drive all the way to Pullman, you're in for the game.
Well, I'm talking about people who are living on campus mostly, but yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, although I will dispute that a little bit, you know, the guys who are showing up the game so drunk they don't remember anything past the first quarter, I'd say they're probably not focusing too much on the game.
My official policy is that's never happened to me. That's my story. I'm going to the grave with it. Please continue.
I think there's police reports about you somewhere. In seriousness, though. Okay, so you know, this is I don't remember 4 years ago. I think it was. It's happened actually more than once, but this particular one was especially good. So it's about midway through the first quarter, and someone comes over the radio saying, "Hey, I think you need to take a look at those gals that are sitting in row such and such, right?" I'm like, you know, oh, gee, fight or something. So I go over there and I start looking, and I'm looking at them, and I'm going, wait a minute. There's 3 of them. They look like they're wearing really, really tight fitting clothing.
Yeah.
And when I look closer, I realize they're not wearing anything. They're wearing G-strings and paint.
Awesome.
Now I realize they've gotten through
They've gotten through
all the security. They're in the stands watching the game wearing nothing but G-strings and paint. So now the sad part
now
is
is this in the student section?
Oh yeah, this is in the student section.
Okay, all right.
Now the sad part, of course, is that this is a violation of the rules.
They have to leave,
and we have to ask them to leave because you know this is a family stadium, right? And we don't want things getting on television and whatnot, which is easy enough to do when people pan the crowd.
Yeah.
But I really didn't want to have to ask them to go. So, actually, I had a guy working for me who was single at the time and more or less volunteered himself to go do it. So it was a little bit more entertaining. So he went over and, did
the people around them have any concept that these girls were essentially naked?
I think a few people noticed, but honestly, it was very professionally. I mean, they must have used like an airbrush or something. I mean, it was pretty professional. When a casual glance, you would not notice.
Wow.
You just think that, wow, that's a nice tight outfit, and this is a good looking girl, right? But when you get up real close and you're paying attention, it became pretty obvious. And so, I had John go over and ask him to either leave or put some clothes on, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but you know what? I am going to have to ask you to put some clothes on or leave.
Wow. That is absolutely unbelievable. So there ends another free space. It happened at the stadium.
It happened at the stadium.
Hey, listen, we really appreciate you folks listening. And you may have noticed at the beginning of the show, we changed the intro a little bit, and that's just because we're growing, we're changing, we're making the appropriate changes to try to make the show better for you as best we can. We've got a new set of headsets. We've got these Shure headsets that we're using now, and I hope it improves the sound. We've got our little mixing board going in our little home studio here. And so, if you have any comments, of course, we're always listening, and we're always, taking into consideration what you have to say. If you want to reach you, Lawrence, what's the best way for somebody to reach you?
Well, probably the easiest thing actually is to go off my Amazon page, because there's a link to my email there. You can go look up any of my books on Amazon, click through to the author page, get the email there. Or, if you got a pen or you can remember it, lakane@ix.netcom.com. And yes, I know that's not the greatest email address, but I've had it for like 15 years. So.
I can beat it. I think I can beat it.
Can you?
Yeah, because my email address is thedojo@quidnunc.net.
That's easy to remember.
Well, if you know Latin, yeah, but it's QUIDNUNC.net. But you can always reach me by just going to the West Seattle Karate website, and you can email me through there. And
or
again,
your Amazon page, right? And both of us you can find on ymaa.com.
Yeah, ymaa.com. We're kind of spread all over the place, but just the easiest thing to remember is westseattlekarate.com.
You got it. Yep.
And that'll get you there. And if I get an errant email from anybody, of course, I forward it to you, and then vice versa. So anyway, thanks for listening. We appreciate your support, and
be safe, everyone,
and be well.
Nice work.
Hi, this is Kris Wilder from Marshall Secrets. Marshall Secrets is free, but it's not costless. So tell your friends about Marshall Secrets. Your good words are the best endorsement we can have. Also, if you like what you hear, buy one of our books, buy one of our DVDs. We think they're pretty good, and we think you'll find value in them too. As always, we appreciate you listening and your support. You can find us pretty quickly by just going to Amazon.com, typing in Lawrence Kane or Kris Wilder, and you can find all of our books and DVDs there. Thanks for listening, and be well.